You know that moment when someone says something that triggers you so deeply you can't even explain why? When your reaction is so intense, so disproportionate, that even you're surprised by it? That's not just a bad day or character flaw. That's your shadow speaking. And it's been running your life from behind the scenes longer than you'd care to admit. Carl Jung spent his entire career studying the hidden parts of the human psyche, and what he discovered was both terrifying and liberating. We all have a shadow self, a collection of everything we've rejected, denied, or pushed down into the depths of our unconscious mind. It's the part of us we don't want to see, the part we've been taught is unacceptable, the part we've spent our whole lives trying to hide from the world and from ourselves. But here's the thing about shadows. The more you try to run from them, the longer they grow. And the longer they grow, the more power they have over you. Jung understood that the shadow isn't just some dark corner of your personality you can ignore. It's an active, living force that influences every decision you make, every relationship you form, every dream you chase or abandon. It's the puppet master pulling strings you didn't even know existed. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how the people who annoy you most seem to share certain qualities? How your strongest reactions often come from behaviors that feel familiar, even if you can't place why? That's because what we hate in others is often what we've rejected in ourselves. Your shadow doesn't just hide in the dark corners of your mind. It walks around in the world, wearing other people's faces, triggering you at the worst possible moments. Picture this. You're scrolling through social media and you see someone posting what you consider to be attention-seeking content. Maybe it's someone showing off their success, their relationship, their perfect life. You feel that familiar surge of irritation, maybe even disgust. You might think, how narcissistic, how shallow. But Jung would tell you to look deeper. What if that reaction isn't about them at all? What if it's about the part of you that desperately wants attention but learned early that wanting to be seen was selfish, wrong, unacceptable? The shadow forms early, usually in childhood, when we learn what parts of ourselves are welcomed and what parts need to be hidden. Maybe you were told that anger was bad, so you pushed down your righteous fury and learned to be nice instead. Maybe you were taught that being too ambitious was unseemly, so you buried your drive and learned to play small. Maybe you were shown that vulnerability was weakness, so you locked away your tender heart and built walls instead. These rejected parts don't disappear. They don't fade away or resolve themselves. They sink into the unconscious, where they ferment and grow and wait for their moment to surface. And surface they will in your dreams, in your triggers, in the qualities you can't stand in others, in the self-destructive patterns you can't seem to break. You know that feeling when you're trying so hard to be good, to be perfect, to be everything you think you should be, and suddenly you snap. When you say something cruel or act in a way that feels completely unlike you. That's your shadow breaking through. It's been building pressure in the depths of your psyche, and when it finally erupts, it often does so with a violence that surprises everyone, including yourself. Jung called this shadow projection, the unconscious process by which we take the parts of ourselves we can't accept and project them onto others. It's like carrying around a psychological mirror that only shows you what you're trying not to see. The person who triggers your anger about laziness might be reflecting your own suppressed desire to rest. The individual whose confidence irritates you might be showing you the boldness you've been too afraid to embrace. But here's where it gets really interesting and really uncomfortable. Your shadow isn't just made up of negative traits. It also contains your unlived potential, your suppressed gifts, your abandoned dreams. Maybe you've spent so long being responsible and practical that you've buried your creative, spontaneous side. Maybe you've been so focused on being humble and self-effacing that you lost touch with your natural confidence and leadership abilities. Think about the last time you felt envious of someone, not just mildly jealous, but that deep, consuming envy that felt almost painful. What were they doing or being that you found so compelling? Chances are they were living out some aspect of your shadow, expressing a part of yourself you've been too afraid to acknowledge, let alone embrace. Let me ask you something else. Have you ever had someone tell you you're not like other people or you're different? While it might feel like a compliment, it often signals that you've been working overtime to keep your shadow hidden. You've become so skilled at presenting an acceptable version of yourself that your authentic complexity, your full humanity, has been lost in the process. The shadow operates like a psychological thermostat. When you try to be too good, too perfect, too one-dimensional, it creates an imbalance that demands correction. This is why people who seem to have it all together often have the most dramatic falls from grace. This is why the person who preaches about morality might be caught in a scandal. This is why the friend who's always positive might suddenly explode with years of suppressed anger. Your shadow doesn't just influence your reactions to others, it shapes your entire life trajectory. The career you didn't pursue because it seemed too risky or unconventional. The relationship you ended because it brought out parts of you that felt too intense or unfamiliar. The dreams you abandoned because they required you to be more assertive, more visible, more authentically yourself than felt safe. Jung believed that the shadow holds the key to individuation, the process of becoming who you really are, rather than who you think you should be. But to access this key, you have to do something that goes against every instinct you've developed. You have to turn toward the darkness instead of away from it. This doesn't mean becoming your worst impulses or letting your shadow run wild. It means acknowledging its existence, understanding its messages, and integrating its energy in conscious, constructive ways. It means recognizing that the parts of yourself you've rejected might actually contain vital information about who you are and what you need to feel whole. Picture your psyche as a house. For most of your life, you've been living in the well-lit, socially acceptable rooms, the living room where you entertain guests, the kitchen where you nourish others, the study where you work diligently. But there's a basement you've been avoiding, a place where you've stored everything you couldn't bear to look at. The shadow work Jung advocated isn't about moving into the basement. It's about finally turning on the lights and seeing what's really down there. You might find anger that needs to be felt and expressed appropriately. You might discover creativity that's been waiting for permission to emerge. You might uncover strength you didn't know you possessed, or vulnerability that could deepen your connections with others. You might find the parts of yourself that have been waiting patiently for acknowledgement, for integration, for acceptance. The process isn't comfortable. Jung himself described it as a descent into hell, a confrontation with everything you've been running from. But he also understood that this confrontation was necessary for psychological health and spiritual growth. You can't become whole while rejecting half of yourself. You can't be authentic while hiding from your authenticity. Let me tell you about something Jung called the compensation principle. The unconscious is always trying to balance out your conscious attitudes. If you're overly rational, it sends you irrational impulses. If you're too accommodating, it stirs up your rebellious side. If you're constantly positive, it might flood you with darker emotions. Your shadow isn't trying to destroy you, it's trying to complete you. Think about the last time you acted in a way that felt completely out of character. Maybe you were usually polite, but found yourself being surprisingly direct. Maybe you were typically cautious, but took an unexpected risk. Maybe you were ordinarily reserved, but spoke up with unusual passion. In those moments, your shadow wasn't sabotaging you. It was trying to restore balance, to express the parts of you that had been suppressed for too long. The fear of the shadow runs deep because we've been taught that we should be consistent, predictable, morally pure. But Jung understood that psychological health requires wholeness, not perfection. It requires the integration of all aspects of the self, not the elimination of the uncomfortable ones. The person who has never felt rage has no access to healthy anger. The individual who has never experienced jealousy can't appreciate genuine contentment. The one who has never acknowledged their capacity for selfishness can't make conscious choices about generosity. Your shadow contains not just your rejected emotions, but also your unlived life. Every path you didn't take, every dream you didn't pursue, every aspect of yourself you didn't develop, it all lives in the shadow, waiting for acknowledgement. This is why midlife crises often involve people making seemingly irrational decisions, suddenly changing careers, ending long-term relationships, or pursuing passions they'd abandoned decades earlier. The shadow has been building pressure, and eventually, it demands expression. But you don't have to wait for a crisis to begin shadow work. You can start paying attention to your triggers, your judgments, your inexplicable reactions. You can start noticing the qualities you admire intensely in others and asking yourself where those qualities live within you. You can start exploring the emotions you've been taught to suppress and the desires you've been told to ignore. Jung developed a technique called active imagination, a way of consciously engaging with the images and figures that emerge from the unconscious. Instead of pushing away difficult emotions or uncomfortable thoughts, you can learn to dialogue with them, to understand what they're trying to tell you. Your anger might be protecting something precious. Your jealousy might be pointing towards something you need to develop. Your shame might be guarding a gift you've been too afraid to share. The shadow doesn't just operate individually. Jung also wrote about the collective shadow, the aspects of humanity that societies reject and project onto others. Understanding your personal shadow can help you recognize these collective projections and avoid being swept up in them. When you've faced your own capacity for cruelty, you're less likely to participate in mob mentality. When you've acknowledged your own neediness, you're less likely to judge others for their vulnerability. You know that feeling when you meet someone and immediately dislike them for reasons you can't explain? That's often your shadow meeting its reflection. The person who triggers your instant judgment might be showing you something about yourself you're not ready to see. Instead of writing them off, you might ask yourself what they're reflecting back to you. What aspect of your shadow are they embodying? The integration process isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more fully yourself. It's about reclaiming the energy you've been using to suppress and hide parts of your nature. It's about stopping the exhausting performance of being only what you think others want you to be, and starting the more authentic work of being who you actually are. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you surprised yourself? When did you last act in a way that felt genuinely spontaneous, genuinely you, rather than carefully controlled and socially appropriate? If it's been a while, it might be because you've been so busy managing your shadow that you've forgotten what it feels like to be whole. The shadow work Jung advocated isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing process of self-discovery and integration. Every time you notice a strong reaction to someone else, every time you feel that familiar surge of judgment or envy or inexplicable irritation, you have an opportunity to look deeper. What is this person showing me about myself? What aspect of my shadow are they embodying? What part of my unlived life are they living? This work requires courage because it means acknowledging that you're not the person you've been pretending to be. You're not just good or bad, strong or weak, rational or emotional. You're complex, contradictory, and multifaceted. You contain multitudes, as Walt Whitman said. And those multitudes include aspects of yourself you've been trained to reject. But here's what Jung discovered in his decades of working with the human psyche. The people who do this work, who face their shadows and integrate them consciously, become more compassionate, more creative, more alive. They stop wasting energy on suppression and start using it for authentic expression. They stop being triggered by others' behavior because they've recognized those behaviors in themselves. They stop trying to be perfect and start being real. The shadow isn't your enemy. It's your teacher, your guide, your path to wholeness. It's been waiting patiently in the darkness, holding everything you've rejected, everything you've been too afraid to claim. It's been whispering to you through your dreams, your triggers, your inexplicable reactions. It's been trying to show you who you really are beyond the mask you've been wearing for so long. Jung understood that the goal isn't to eliminate the shadow, but to make it conscious. When you can see your shadow clearly, when you can acknowledge its existence without being overwhelmed by it, it loses its power to control you unconsciously. Instead of being at the mercy of your triggers and projections, you can choose how to respond. Instead of being driven by unconscious impulses, you can make conscious decisions about how to express your full range of human experience. The process of shadow integration doesn't make you a worse person. It makes you a more complete person. It doesn't unleash your worst impulses. It gives you conscious access to your full range of emotional and psychological resources. When you're not afraid of your anger, you can use it to set boundaries and fight for what matters. When you're not ashamed of your neediness, you can ask for help when you need it. When you're not terrified of your selfishness, you can take care of yourself without guilt. Think about the person you most admire. Chances are they're not someone who's never experienced difficult emotions or made mistakes. They're someone who's integrated their full humanity, who's learned to express their complexity in conscious, constructive ways. They've done the work of facing their shadow and making it conscious. The shadow holds your power as much as your problems. It contains your suppressed strength, your unexpressed creativity, your unlived dreams. When you reclaim these aspects of yourself, you don't just heal your triggers and projections. You access parts of your potential that have been waiting for permission to emerge. You know that feeling when you're trying so hard to be good, to be acceptable, to be what others want you to be, and it feels exhausting. That's because you're working against your own nature. You're trying to be half a person, and half a person requires twice as much energy to maintain. When you integrate your shadow, you stop fighting against yourself and start working with your full psychological resources. The shadow work Jung advocated isn't about indulging your worst impulses or giving yourself permission to be cruel or destructive. It's about recognizing that those impulses exist, understanding what they're trying to tell you, and finding conscious, constructive ways to express their underlying energy. Your anger might need to become healthy assertiveness. Your envy might need to become motivation for growth. Your selfishness might need to become appropriate self-care. This is why Jung emphasized that individuation, the process of becoming who you really are, requires courage. It means stepping out of the safe, predictable patterns you've created and into the unknown territory of your full humanity. It means risking disapproval, misunderstanding, and the discomfort of not knowing exactly who you are anymore. But on the other side of this courage lies something precious: authenticity. Not the Instagram version of authenticity, but the real thing. The capacity to be genuinely yourself, with all your contradictions and complexities and surprising depths. The ability to respond to life from your full range of human experience, not just the parts you've decided are acceptable. Your shadow has been trying to teach you this all along. Every trigger, every projection, every inexplicable reaction has been an invitation to look deeper, to reclaim more of yourself, to become more whole. The person who cut you off in traffic and made you disproportionately angry might be showing you your own suppressed urgency. The colleague whose confidence irritates you might be reflecting your own unlived boldness. The friend whose vulnerability makes you uncomfortable might be pointing toward your own need for deeper connection. Jung believed that the shadow holds the key to individuation, but accessing that key requires a fundamental shift in how you relate to yourself. Instead of trying to be good, you have to be willing to be real. Instead of trying to be perfect, you have to be willing to be complete. Instead of trying to be what others want you to be, you have to be willing to discover who you actually are. This doesn't mean becoming selfish or destructive. It means becoming conscious. It means taking responsibility for your full range of human experience, including the parts you've been taught to reject. It means recognizing that your shadow contains not just your problems, but also your potential. The person who has never faced their shadow lives in a world of projections and triggers, constantly reacting to external stimuli without understanding why. They're at the mercy of their unconscious patterns, repeating the same mistakes, attracting the same problems, caught in cycles they can't break because they can't see the internal dynamics that create them. But the person who has begun to integrate their shadow lives in a different world. They still feel triggered sometimes, but they understand what's happening. They still experience difficult emotions, but they're not afraid of them. They still make mistakes, but they learn from them. instead of repeating them unconsciously. You know that feeling when you're around someone who seems completely comfortable with themselves, who doesn't seem to be performing or pretending, who can handle conflict without falling apart and receive praise without becoming inflated. That's often someone who has done shadow work, who has integrated their rejected aspects and learned to express their full humanity consciously. The shadow work Jung advocated isn't just about personal healing. It's about creating a more authentic, more conscious way of being in the world. When you're not projecting your rejected aspects onto others, you can see them more clearly. When you're not afraid of your own complexity, you can handle others' complexity with more grace. When you're not exhausted from suppressing half of yourself, you have more energy for genuine connection and creative expression. This is why Jung saw shadow work as essential not just for individual psychological health, but for the health of society as a whole. When enough people stop projecting their shadows onto others, when enough people take responsibility for their full range of human experience, the collective shadow loses its power to create conflict and division. But it starts with you. It starts with your willingness to look at what you've been avoiding, to feel what you've been suppressing, to reclaim what you've been rejecting. It starts with your courage to be whole instead of good, real instead of perfect, authentic instead of acceptable. The shadow you've been hiding isn't your enemy. It's your teacher, your guide, your path to wholeness. It's been waiting patiently in the darkness, holding everything you need to become who you really are. It's been calling to you through your dreams, your triggers, your inexplicable reactions. It's been trying to show you that you're not the limited, one-dimensional person you've been pretending to be. You're vast, complex, and wonderfully, terrifyingly human. Jung understood that the goal of psychological development isn't to become a better person in the conventional sense. It's to become a more complete person. It's to integrate all aspects of your humanity, including the ones you've been taught to reject. It's to stop being afraid of your own complexity and start embracing it as the source of your unique gifts and perspective. The shadow work doesn't end with recognition. It's an ongoing process of integration, of learning to express your full range of human experience in conscious, constructive ways. Every time you choose to look at your trigger instead of just reacting to it, every time you ask yourself what someone else is reflecting back to you instead of just judging them, every time you choose authenticity over acceptability, you're doing shadow work. And slowly, gradually, you begin to change, not into someone else, but into more fully yourself. You stop being controlled by unconscious patterns and start conscious choices. You stop being at the mercy of your triggers and start understanding their messages. You stop hiding from your humanity and start embracing it as the source of your strength, your creativity, your capacity for genuine connection. The shadow you've been hiding has been trying to complete you all along. It's been holding the keys to your wholeness, your authenticity, your full potential. It's been waiting for you to stop running and start listening, to stop suppressing and start integrating, to stop being afraid of who you are and start celebrating your magnificent, complex, beautifully human nature. You've always been more than the person you've been pretending to be. You've always contained depths and complexities and potentials that couldn't be contained in any single role or identity. Your shadow has been guarding these treasures, waiting for you to be ready to claim them. Now finally, you can stop hiding and start becoming. You can stop performing and start being. You can stop rejecting yourself and start embracing the fullness of who you really are. You've always been the one you've been waiting for. Now finally, you see it.